The sharp howl of wind tearing through the plains ripped John Parker from his Texas porch as dusk settled over his 200-acre ranch. A fierce gust that slammed the screen door against its frame with a bang that reverberated through the stillness. His rifle leaping to his hands as the coffee mug slipped from his grip, crashing to the weathered boards below and splintering into jagged shards that skittered across the wood like scattered bones. He stood tall, his heart pounding like a war drum in his chest. The burn scar on his forearm throbbing with a dull ache as he squinted toward the ridge that loomed against the horizon. The lake's silver surface churning violently beneath a sky bruised with dark storm clouds rolling in from the west, jagged streaks of lightning flickering like the warning of an angry god. After yesterday's hard-won courtroom victory that snapped Grayson's latest legal chains, John had allowed himself a fleeting moment to hope for peace. A chance to mend the ranch's wounds and Ethan's fractured trust, but now the air crackled with something far more menacing than thunder. The blinking light had glimpsed on the ridge over recent nights, no longer just a whisper, but a roar building in the distance, a threat he could feel in his bones. He stormed across the yard toward the barn, his boots pounding the dirt with purpose, saddling Dusty with hands steady from decades of grit and survival. The chestnut mare snorting nervously as he swung into the saddle, her ears twitching at the wind's mournful wail, and he rode hard toward the ridge, rifle raised high. The wildflowers lining the plains bending low under the gale's relentless force, their vibrant colors muted in the gathering gloom. His mind racing as he prepared to confront whatever shadow dared to challenge him beneath the storm's dark shroud. The air grew heavy with the scent of rain and ozone as he spurred Dusty up the muddy incline, the sun long swallowed by the roiling mass of clouds overhead. The lake's dark expanse below reflecting each jagged bolt that split the sky with a ferocity that set his teeth on edge. He crested the ridge, reining in sharply with a thud that sank his boots deep into the sodden earth, the wind whipping his Stetson and tugging at his denim jacket as he dismounted, his eyes narrowing at the scene that unfolded before him like a nightmare carved from the storm itself. 3 figures clad in black rain gear, their hoods pulled tight against the deluge, crouched low behind a makeshift blind of tangled branches and flapping tarps, the glint of a scoped rifle catching the lightning in one man's hands, its barrel trained with deadly precision on the ranch house nestled in the valley below, the warm glow of its windows a fragile beacon against the tempest. A 4th shadow darted from the thick brush to the left, a handheld radio crackling in his grip, static hissing through the wind as he barked orders John couldn't quite decipher. The words lost to the storm's fury, but their intent chillingly clear. Lightning flashed again, brighter this time, illuminating a faded logo stitched onto the tarp, Grayson Holdings. The letters worn but unmistakable, a brand burned into John's memory from months of fire and steel, and his blood ran cold, suspicion coiling tight like a rattler ready to strike. His rifle steady as he chambered around, the metallic click swallowed by the gale's roar, his breath steady despite the chaos hammering his senses. This was no random prowler, no petty thief caught in the rain. Grayson's jail-bound whispers had festered into something tangible, an ambush cloaked by the storm. And John knew he was staring down the barrel of a fight that could end everything Head bled to protect. He crept forward through the mud, rifle raised, the rain lashing his face and soaking through his clothes, each drop a cold sting against his skin as he edged along the ridge's crest. The thorns of the brush snagging at his denim and drawing thin lines of blood, his old war wound flaring with a sharp pang that shot through his leg with every careful step. The storm was a beast now, its thunder rolling deep and loud, shaking the ground beneath him as he flanked the blind, his shadow lost in the darkness, his movements silent despite the ache gnawing at his bones. A bolt of lightning struck a lone cedar 50 yards off, the crack splitting the air and briefly blinding him with its white-hot glare, and the radio man spun at the sound, his hooded head snapping toward John, His shout of alarm cut short as John lunged from the shadows, slamming the butt of his rifle into the man's jaw with a sickening crunch that sent him sprawling backward into the mud, the radio splashing into a puddle where it fizzled and died, its static voice extinguished. The other three whirled at the commotion, the sniper swinging his scoped rifle up with a curse, his finger tightening on the trigger, but John was already moving, rolling low across the slick ground as a shot rang out, the bullet whizzing past his ear and burying itself in the dirt behind him with a wet thud, the storm's roar swallowing the echo. He sprang up, mud caking his hands and knees, and fired back, the crack of his rifle sharp and true, the bullet grazing the sniper's arm with a spray of blood that mixed with the rain. The man yelping as his weapon slipped from his grasp and clattered uselessly into the mire, his free hand clutching the wound as he staggered back. "Drop it, all of you!" John roared, his voice cutting through the wind like a blade, rising to his full height as he advanced, towering over the blind, rain streaming from his Stetson's brim. The lake below churning with the storm's fury, its waves slapping the shore in a relentless rhythm. The two unharmed attackers hesitated, their hoods obscuring their faces, but then they charged. One brandishing a machete that gleamed wickedly in the lightning, the other balling his fists as rain streaked down his gear. Their footsteps splashing through the mud as they closed the distance with snarls of defiance. John sidestepped the machete's wild arc, years of combat and ranch life honed into instinct. The blade whistling past his shoulder as he drove his elbow hard into the attacker's throat, a choked gag escaping the man as the weapon sank into the mud and he collapsed, gasping for air through a bruised windpipe. The fist fighter swung next, his knuckles glancing off John's jaw with a dull thud that snapped his head to the side, a burst of pain flaring hot. But John grabbed the man's arm mid-swing, twisting it with a force that drew a sharp cry, the snap of bone audible even over the thunder as the thug crumpled to his knees, clutching his shattered wrist, his bravado drowned in the downpour. The sniper, still bleeding, lunged for his rifle, desperation in his eyes, but John kicked it away, the metal skidding into the brush as he pressed the barrel of his own gun to the man's chest, pinning him against the tarp blind, rain pooling around their boots in muddy rivulets. "Who sent you?" John growled, his voice low and lethal, kicking the sniper's leg to keep him down, the man's pained grunt mingling with the wind as thunder rolled overhead, lightning casting stark shadows across his bloodied face. "Talk, or the next one's through your heart." The sniper spat into the mud, his voice ragged and strained, blood and rain dripping from his chin. "Dallas, suit's orders, Grayson's cash. Said wait for the storm. Hit you hard, scare you off the land. That's all I got, swear it." John's chest tightened, rage boiling hotter than the storm itself, the lake's dark glow flickering below as lightning struck again, illuminating the wreckage of the ambush. 3 men down, 1 unconscious. The tarp flapping loose like a tattered flag, Grayson's logo a taunting specter. "Scare me," he snarled, hauling the sniper up by his collar and shoving him hard against a gnarled oak, the bark scraping his back as he groaned, the others writhing in the mud, their fight washed away by the deluge. "You picked the wrong damn night and the wrong damn man." Headlights pierced the storm's veil, Frank's battered truck roaring up the ridge with a growl of its engine, mud spraying from its tires as it skidded to a halt. Mary Ellen's gray mare galloping alongside, her braid plastered to her back, shotgun gripped tight in her hands, its barrel glinting wetly in the lightning's flash. Jake and Ethan piled out of the truck, their faces fierce and rain-soaked, boots splashing as they charged forward, Tom leaping from the bed with a length of rope coiled in his hands, his broad frame steady despite the gale. "What the hell's this?" Frank barked, his pistol gleaming as he surveyed the sprawl of thugs, the tarps snapping in the wind, the scoped rifle half buried in the muck. John spat rain from his lips, his voice rough as gravel, wiping mud from his jaw where the punch had landed. Grayson's storm, Dallas hit, scoped the house, took him down before they fired more in one shot. Mary Ellen swung down from her mare, her boots sinking into the mire, braids swinging as she leveled her shotgun at the machete man. Her voice steady despite the tremor of cold in her hands. Took him good. Storm's their grave now, and they're lucky it's just mud they're eating. Ethan surged forward, grabbing the fist fighter by his broken arm, wrenching him up with a snarl that bared his teeth, his voice raw with a fury John hadn't heard since the betrayal. You aimed at my family, my dad. I'll bury you right here. His fist cocked back, rain streaming down his face, but John stepped in, gripping his shoulder firm, the rifle close, his touch of tether pulling Ethan back from the edge. Enough. They're done, John said, his tone steel over the wind, the lake churning below as lightning lit the ridge in stark relief. Ethan, tie him up. Jake, help him. Hargrove's next. They don't walk from this. Jake nodded, hauling the rope from Tom and tossing a length to Ethan, who hesitated, his chest heaving, then obeyed, his hands trembling but sure as he bound the sniper's wrists. The man's groans muffled by the storm, his loyalty a fragile flame flickering stronger with each knot. Tom dragged the unconscious radio man into the open, securing his hands as Frank kicked the machete clear, the blade sinking deeper into the mud, while Mary Ellen kept her shotgun trained, her eyes sharp for any twitch of resistance. Frank pulled the radio from his truck, his voice crackling over the static as he hailed Sheriff Hargrove. Dan, ridge west of Parker's, for down. Grayson's mark, scoped rifle, assault in the storm. Bring a cage, and hurry. These boys ain't going nowhere. The storm raged on, dusk bleeding into night. The wind howling as wildflowers flattened against the earth, their petals torn free and scattered like confetti across the muddy ridge. Hargrove's patrol car screeched up minutes later, its lights piercing the deluge like twin beacons, tires spinning in the mire as deputies spilled out, their boots splashing, cuffs glinting wetly as they hauled the thugs upright. The scoped rifle and tarp bagged as evidence, rain streaking their faces with grim determination. What happened, John? Hargrove asked, stepping from the car, his badge glinting under his hat's brim, rain dripping from its edge as he shielded his eyes against the gale, the thunder a low rumble fading into the distance. John stood tall, rifle slung across his back, his voice steady despite the ache in his jaw and the cold seeping into his bones. Ambush, Grayson's lawyer, Dallas Cash, scoped us from the ridge. Used the storm as cover. I broke it before they could hit the house. Hargrove's jaw tightened, his eyes flicking to the tarp, then back to John, a grim nod cutting through the rain. Lawyer's loose. Grayson sells a damn hornet's nest. These boys are booked. Assault, conspiracy, weapons. I'll dig deeper. Stay sharp, John. This ain't over. The deputies loaded the thugs into the patrol car, their groans and curses lost to the wind as the doors slammed shut, the vehicle lurching back down the ridge, its red taillights fading into the storm's gray shroud. Dawn broke hours later, the sky a bruised gray, the lake calm once more, its surface smooth as glass beneath the clearing clouds. The crew gathered in the house, coffee steaming in mugs, biscuits soggy from the damp. Ethan slouched in a chair, mud caked on his boots and blood staining his knuckles from the fight. His face a mix of exhaustion and resolve, trust forging harder in the silence. The map lay spread wide across the table, the ridge marked in red ink, a testament to the night's battle. The lantern light casting long shadows over their weary faces. Caught him clean, Frank said, leaning back, his pistol gleaming on his hip, his voice gravelly but sure. Storm's cleared out, and Grayson's whispers hoarse, but it ain't silent yet. Mary Ellen squeezed John's hand, her fingers cold but steady, her voice a quiet anchor in the room. You held the line, Ethan too. We're stealing the rain, John, and they can't bend us. Jake grinned, his fists unclenching for the first time in hours, rainwater still dripping from his hair as he glanced at his brother. He tied him tight, fought like a Parker. Maybe he's earning it after all. Sarah nodded from the corner, her phone glowing with Hargrove's last update, her voice resolute. Sheriff's got him. Grayson's lawyers the thread. We'll pull it, find the end. Matt tapped his laptop, fingers pausing as he met John's gaze, his tone sharp. Dallas cash. Scoped rifle. Someone still paying. I'll trace it. Won't stop till we know. Tom stood by the door, lantern dimming, his broad frame a silent pillar, his voice low but firm. I'll watch the ridge. Storm's gone, but eyes ain't. John met Ethan's gaze across the table, the boy's eyes steady despite the weight of his past. His hands still trembling faintly from the rope and the fight, and John's voice cut through the room like steel tempered in fire. You stood tall tonight, bled for it. That's good. Keep it up, Ethan. The storm's just the start. We've got more coming. Ethan swallowed hard, nodding slow, his voice quiet but raw. I will, Dad, swear it. No more running. The room fell silent. The lake glowing gold outside as the first rays of sun pierced the clouds, the plains stretching wide and unbroken, wildflowers battered but enduring, their roots deep in the Texas soil. John rose, rifle close, stepping onto the porch where the air smelled of rain and renewal, his eyes scanning the ridge where the fight had raged, the memory of Grayson's logo a bitter taste on his tongue. Across the horizon, a light blinked, binoculars catching the dawn, then vanishing into the trees, a whisper still breathing in the shadows. He chambered around, the click loud in the quiet, his jaw set hard, ready for the storm's next roar, knowing the chains of the past and the threats of the present were far from broken.